Hello, this is OTG, welcoming you back to Harmony Within, a series dedicated to off-the-grid conversations about spiritual wellness, recovery, and the deeper truths you don't often hear spoken in public. In our last session, step 1, we learned humility. We admitted we were powerless and saw the problem for the first time clearly. In step 1, we said, I am flawed. We owned ourselves, no excuses, no hiding. The truth wasn't there to crush us, it was there to set us free. And if you answered the step 1 questions with honesty, you now hold something powerful. Those answers are more than reflections, they are the building blocks of your redemption. They give you the courage to voice what you truly need as we move into step 2. Now, in step 2, we take the next breath and say, I can fix this with help. This is where humility turns into hope. There is a document called How It Works, and it's in the big book on page 58 to 60. And this details the process and the vitality of a higher power in healing. My sponsor personally told me that you have to come to believe in something if you're going to believe that you can survive this. Because on your own accord, you're not doing it. So you have to believe in something higher than yourself. A spiritual axiom is required. The way my sponsor said it was, spirituality in this program is like the wet part of the ocean. It's inseparable. So I'm going to read how it works so you get an idea of how important having a spiritual axiom is. This is how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to a simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty, and their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose, in a general way, what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it's too much for us, but there is one who has all that power. That one is God, and may you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps that we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact natures of our wrongs. 6. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for his knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism or addiction. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. That passage reminds us this program is not about being perfect. It's about progress. Step 1 gave us humility, the courage to say, I am flawed. Step 2 now gives us the hope to say, I can fix this with help. And that's when God will start sending you help. In step 1, if you go to a meeting, you're going to run into the fellowship. That's the first help you get. Through the fellowship, you find a sponsor. And that's the second big building block in your toolbox of recovery. Your sponsor will guide you through the steps with his experience, strength, and hope, and will guide you through how to perceive these steps in a way that's beneficial. My experience is when I came into AA, I went to meetings for months looking for something, and I didn't know what I was looking for was a mentor or a sponsor. It just happens to be integrated into AA for that. So I met him at a meeting, and there were so many people there. There was only 2 seats left, and I sat in one, and he came in and he sat next to me in the other one. And I had a book and he didn't, so I tried to share my book with him. He said, no, it's important for you to read that. And so I felt kind of like pushed off, and so I just kind of sunk back into myself. Well, I guess he noticed it, because at the end of the meeting, he asked me if I wanted to go to the diner for a fellowship. And I said, okay, I'll go. And I went and sat with him at a booth, and we talked. And after our conversation, he asked me where I live, which is right down the road from him. And he said, well, do you mind stopping over tomorrow and we can talk about some things? And I said, sure. And when I did, he asked me first, upon sitting down in his living room, do you have the capacity to be honest with yourself? And I said, I think so. I don't know. And he said, well, that's an honest answer. And he asked me if I was spiritual. And I said, well, I think I have a soul. And he said, well, what about God? I said, I don't know about God. I mean, I get mixed signals. Religion says this. All these religions say this. I don't think that God would create anything that's condemned. A lot of religions look at homosexuality as though it's a sin. And I just don't think that God would create something that's sinful organically. Like, I don't believe that he places negative value on creations that he made. So, I mean, there was an issue there. And my sponsor addressed that with me. He said, so many people are led away from a higher power because of religion. And religion's training wheels for spirituality, but people never get out of it. The Southern Baptists have a term called a personal relationship with God. And I think that's a valid thing, because that's all I have to give God. God has everything. Everything is already God's. So the only thing I can give God is my pain, my gratitude, my joy, all of the things that he will either amplify or remove from me. And I think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that this is a spiritual program. So we have a chapter to the agnostics, which states that you can use the fellowship as a higher power. That gets people through, but it limits you. And it's very important to understand what my sponsor had said, which was the spirituality aspect of AA is like the wet part of the ocean, meaning that it's inseparable. You have to have a spiritual axiom in order to reap the full benefits of these steps. And I think that's what I want to really stress. Like, I cannot force anybody to believe in God. I cannot force anybody to subscribe to my beliefs. But what I can do is tell you what has worked for me and what has worked for thousands and millions of people that came before you. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, because that is how this program works. The sharing that we do is like a prayer to God when you're saying, hey, take this from me. And for those who don't know how to pray, because some people don't, AA comes equipped with prayers. And one of the first prayers that you learn coming into the program is the Serenity Prayer. And it's really, really a good prayer to learn when you first come into recovery. It's kind of training wheels for spirituality in a sense, because it states something very, very simple. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that in itself is so powerful. That is the bridge between step 2 and step 3. Because you came to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity, and then in step 3 you'll be putting the effort in by prayer and through spiritual awareness to start the process. This is where faith comes in. So step 2 is the bridge from despair to hope. It doesn't require you to have it all figured out. It asks for willingness, and that's all, to open the door on a power greater than yourself. So you live step 2 in small acts. When you whisper, God help me, you're practicing step 2. It's a prayer. When you show up for a meeting, you're practicing step 2. You're showing up to a place with more people than you that have the same problem and a heck of a lot more answers than you. It's a collective, and a collective is greater than yourself. When you call a sponsor instead of isolating, you are taking an adversive move to what your disease wants you to do. You are doing the next right thing. You are believing that this choice is the better choice, and that belief is step 2. And when you remind yourself that it's about progress, not perfection, and you give yourself that break, you are practicing step 2. So step 2 teaches us 3 things. That humility gives birth to hope. And that willingness, even if small, is enough to get started with. And finally, that when we allow a power greater than ourselves into our lives, restoration begins. How does it begin? Because of those questions that I asked in step 1. How are you powerless? How are you unmanageable? Those are the pivotal points that you will use step 2 to pray over and translate into faith in step 3. I have reflection questions for the step that we're in now, for step 2, and they refer back to step 1. So my first reflection question for step 2 is, from my step 1 answers, what truths now serve as the foundation for my healing? For me, my step 1 answer was, I gave too much power away. I would allow people to depend too heavily upon me, and then I would have nothing left for myself, and so I would completely break and let everybody down. And I felt like justified. Well, that character flaw or shortcoming is something that I need to acknowledge and pray about. And that's what I did. So the second question is, how did humility in step 1, admitting I am flawed, prepare you for step 2? Well, I think that admitting that you have a problem that's more of a crisis is very honest. I think you just are holding up a truth. And I believe that conviction is definitely more sane than saying, my life is falling apart, but I'm okay. It's the world. And that's so common with the alcoholic mind, that we think it's everybody else. My third question is, what lies did addiction convince me of that I now see were insane? For me, everyone was out to get me. Everyone was out to get me. And I told myself that. And on top of it, I would tell myself that, oh, I'm too good for this, or oh, I'm too bad for that. I told myself so many lies that I realized that I lied to myself to pave the way to my next relapse. I was never a first-time winner. I always had to have God come back around and say, this is what you forgot, So it's important to be very thorough from the start. My fourth question is, when I picture sanity, what does it look like in my daily life? For me, it looks like peace. I want my life to be peaceful. I want it to be calm. I want it to be a sanctuary, not a party, not a horror show. Sanity is being open to my fellow human being in a way that's not jaded or bitter or guarded. I want my heart to be soft. And to me, that's what sanity looks like. And my fifth question is, how can I practice willingness today, even if my faith feels small? Well, listening to this right now is showing me willingness. Going to a meeting, thinking about this concept, really, really soul searching over the deficits that you have and how you can overcome them. I think that is great ways to practice willingness, because what you're being willing to do is simply be open to a new concept, to be open to a new way of life, to be open to a different way of coping that involves a power greater than yourself. And so step 1 left us saying I'm flawed. Step 2 brings us to say I can fix this with help. This is moving into step 3, which is where faith comes in. And you're going to say in this, I am not alone. That is the beauty of step 3. I have faith that I am not alone and that all will be well. So, prayer and meditation are the quickest ways to grow that faith in step 3. And we'll step more deeply into that in step 3 when we make the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. That is when hope becomes surrender, and surrender becomes freedom. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you all have a blessed day. If you've seen value in this, please click like and hit subscribe. And if you feel like leaving any comments, I will read them and respond in my next episode if you leave anything. And I wish you the best.